The Enterprise is investigating the disappearance of the starship Archon, and at its last known location, they find a society that appears all peaceful and whatnot, but everyone seems to worship a guy named Landru, and some of the people don't take kindly to strangers. But when Sulu comes back from the surface a doe-eyed Landru worshiper, Landru better watch out because Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and the gang are bringing about the return of the Archons. Hit it! Hey! Got a few guest stars this week, but we'll stick to the big ones. But this has been the most non-regular principals and extras we've seen so far. First, we got Harry Towns as Rager. Big on the guest star circuit, appeared in everything from The Twilight Zone to Gunsmoke to Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. Up until 1988, you name it, he probably had a guest spot in it. Torrin Thatcher plays Marplon. Another prolific guest star, Torrin showed up in a lot of fun genre movies too, like Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Blackbeard the Pirate, and The Black Shield of Falworth, whatever the hell that is. John Lorma plays Tamar. Now this guy also did some episodes of Twilight Zone, was in 1982's Creepshow, and a million other appearances, but if he's looking familiar to you, that's because we've already seen him as scientist Theodore Haskins in The Cage and The Menagerie. We'll see him one more time in the original series, too. Carl Held plays sociologist Lindstrom. Lots of appearances from Sea Hunt to LA Law, but is probably best known as Garth on 46 episodes of Falcon Crest. And finally, we got Charles McCauley as the man himself, Landru. This guy showed up in some really fun stuff. He played Colonel Sawyer in V the Series, was Older Man in Car in a movie just called Whore. Incidentally, Younger Man in Car was played by Star Trek alum Robert Gowron O'Reilly. He was in the, in my opinion, hugely underrated movie 3 O'Clock High, and played Dracula in Blackula, with future Star Trek guest star William Marshall in the title role. And he'll show up again in the original series episode, Wolf in the Fold. But enough all of this. Let's get into the plot. So we open in Mayberry and we see Sulu and O'Neill dressed for their Hamilton audition running down a deserted street. The music tells us that they're in danger, and it ain't long until we see what they're running from. Some creepy guys in what looks like monk robes carrying staffs are slowly walking toward them. They look easy enough to outrun, but O'Neill says they're everywhere, so I guess that ain't an option. Sulu calls up to the Enterprise and requests an emergency beam out. Kirk orders the transporter room to beam them up and heads down to meet them. O'Neill can't wait for that, though, and he runs off. One of the creepy monks makes it to Sulu and aims his staff right at his head. It makes a weird chirpy sound, and suddenly Sulu gets a big ol' smile on his face. Then he gets beamed up. In the transporter room, Sulu looks to be on nitrous oxide and some serious rising kush, talking about Kirk ain't of the body, whatever the hell that means. He ain't so tranquil, though, that he don't have some costume notes for sociologist Lindstrom. Apparently, Lindstrom sent Sulu and O'Neill down in the wrong kind of gear, and Sulu says because of that, quote, they knew we were Archons. Lots of weird stuff coming out of our helmsman here. McCoy gets there, and they sit Sulu down. Kirk wants to know where O'Neill is, and Mellow Sulu, Mulu, just says that the people down on the planet are the nicest in the universe, and it's paradise. Believes it so strongly, in fact, he says it 3 more times. 5 stars would definitely get zapped by a creepy monk there again. After the opening titles, a captain's log gets us up to speed. The planet is Beta 3. The Enterprise is investigating the disappearance of the starship Archon 100 years ago. Since Sulu came back high as a tribble with static cling, Kirk says he's got to go down and investigate. So Kirk beams down with Spock, McCoy, sociologist Lindstrom, and security guards Galloway and, hey, look who it is! Leslie, moving up on the world. Try not to get killed, buddy. Well, this time Wardrobe suited him out in something that's a little less Hamilton and a little more Tombstone. Also, Spock's got a throw blanket around his head, because that's totally less conspicuous than pointy ears, am I right? With all the cowboy clothes, nobody's heard of hats. Anyways, when they get down there, they find that the whole place is just as zonked out as Sulu was. As they take a stroll, they meet a guy who could really benefit from an acting lesson, who notes that Kirk and the gang are strangers. He asks if they're in town, quote, for festival. Kirk yes-ands the guy and tells him, yeah, sure, festival. Well, Smiley McTeeth over here suggests that the group goes to somebody named Rage's house and get a room to stay in while they're in town. But he warns them that they gotta do it quick because it's almost something called the Red Hour. Clock tower indicates that that's gonna be your 6 o'clock. As Kirk is asking what the hell is festival, a woman named Tula comes up, and Community Theater Jones over here asks if her father can put the strangers up while they're in town. Must be Rage's kid, Tula. She asks if they're from the valley. Lindstrom, taking his improv cue from Kirk, says, yeah, that's it. We're from the valley. Didn't you notice the shoes? Well, as Tula is pointing out where the Rager Inn Express is, the clock strikes red hour and all hell breaks loose. Tula is screaming, other people are screaming and running around, Lindstrom gets hit with a log, people are throwing stuff. What, the Red Sox win a ball game or something? Well, they make it to the hotel and 3 AARP members seem surprised to see them. They figure out one of the old dudes is Rager, and Lindstrom says his daughter's out in the craziness, and Rager just says, it's festival, what are you gonna do? Then he says it's the will of Landru. The shortest of the olds, a real scooch named Hakem, starts bitching about why ain't these guys at the festival, they're too young to be excused and all this, and the tall one Tamar is like, they're from the valley, maybe they do the Jewish Red Hour and it was yesterday or something. But Shorty don't want to hear it, talking about they got lawgivers in the valley too, and Landru is everywhere and all this, and he says he's going to tell the lawgivers about the strangers. Tamar says, hey, chill, little dude. The lawgivers probably already know because they got the whole infallibility thing going on, right? Well, Oompa McLoompa over here says, what, you making fun of the lawgivers now? Well, Rager takes Kirk and the boys up to their room, and after they head upstairs, Runty McAsshole claims that the strangers are not of the body, and then he storms out. We've been hit with a lot of new words in the last few minutes. Well, Rager shows our boys into their room, and he says that they can come back here after festival. Kirk says they ain't going, which weirds Rager out. Then Kirk says he wants to know more about the festival and Landru, and that really freaks out our boy here. And as he's trying to figure all this out, Kirk asks about Landru again, and Rager freaks out again and runs out without a word. Well, that ain't hinky at all. Crossfade, and it's later in the night. The festival is still going on, and Kirk just watches the chaos from the window in their room. He wants to find some answers, so he asks McCoy to check the atmosphere, see if there's something in the air that's making these people cuckoo. He tells Lindstrom to do some research, see if there's a mention of anything like this in there. And then he tells Spock they gotta come up with a plan for in the morning. And speaking of that, another crossfade, and it's morning. Kirk is on watch, and he walks over to the window just as the clock is striking what is, I guess, the green hour at 6 in the morning. And just like that, festival is over, and everyone's on diazepam again. Kirk wakes Spock up, who was sleeping with his eyes open like friggin' Gandalf over here, and then wakes the rest of the team up too. They hear a woman screaming downstairs, so they go and see that it's Rager's kid Tula, dealing with some festival aftermath. Rager and Tamar are trying to calm her down, but McCoy takes her off to attend to her medically. Lindstrom is pissed that Rager didn't try to protect her, and Rager just says it's the will of Landru. Kirk asks again, what the hell is a Landru? Well, Tamar is like, boy, you weren't kidding, these valley types don't know shit, huh? Well, Rager says that must mean they're not of the body. Then he asks kind of tentatively if Kirk and the bunch are Archons. Kirk says, maybe. Tamar and Rager say that they heard that there was going to be more Archons running around, and they'll hide the boys because the lawgivers are going to come, and presumably they don't like Archons worth a damn. Well, too late. Beverly Leslie over here has showed up with 2 of those creepy monks that popped Sulu before. Well, Stumpy McPunchable Face fingers Tamar, saying he's the one that made fun of the brothers of the Creeplican Order, and these guys apparently don't need nothing but the word of a Keebler elf, and they straight up grease Tamar with their staffs. Then they tell Kirk he attacked the body, and he needs to be absorbed, so he's got to come with them. Kirk says, no. You get the feeling that these guys don't hear no very often, so they huddle up, presumably trying to decide what to do now. He said no. He said no? He said no. They can't say no. Well, apparently they can. He said no? You were standing right there, Frank. I was thinking of something. Well, what does the manual say to do when they say no? That ain't in the manual. The manual says they always say yes. It ain't in the manual? It ain't in the manual. Well, tell him again. I told him twice. He said no twice. He said no twice. He said no twice. What the hell, right? Well, Brigham Short over here says that they was from the valley. Maybe he can't understand your accent. You got a city accent. I don't got a shitty accent. City. You got a city accent. Say it like a valley guy. Go. I can't do the voices thing, Frank. I ain't no good at that. No, you're good at it. You can do a killer Kermit the Body. I don't want to do it in front of these guys. Well, we got to do something. It's 1/2 the purple hour for Landru's sake. We got to get going. Maybe I used too many words or something. I'll dumb it down for this guy. So the lawgivers rephrase that they order Kirk and his people to go with them to what he calls the absorption chamber. Kirk once again says no. Right Monk has had enough and is about to bring the staff ruckus, and Kirk snatches it out of his hand. Left Monk don't know what to do with any of this and just kind of stands there waiting to see how this plays out. A weird sound happens, and the robes say it's Landru. The shorter day saint beats feet. The lawgivers go into update firmware mode or something, and Spock checks out the staff that Kirk yoinked from Right Monk and finds out that it's just an empty pipe. No machinery, no gunpowder, nothing. Rager says they gotta get out of there while the lawgivers are in standby mode. He's got a place they can hide, but they gotta go now. They get out on the street and they do their best to act like empty-headed morons, but they don't get very far before everyone on the street stops in their tracks and slowly and serenely reaches down to find something to beat the snot out of our boys with. Rager says this is Landru summoning the body. Well, now it's time for the zombie chase. Kirk tells the boys to put their phasers on stun and tells Rager to pick up the pace. Some Landrugs block their way and Kirk and the team stun them. One more group shows up and the boys drop them too. There's an opening now, but as they're going through it, they notice that one of the stunned people is Lieutenant O'Neill from the cold open. Kirk wants to take him with him, but Rager says he's been absorbed, and if they take him, Landru will be able to find them through him. Kirk insists, though. Kirk don't leave no one behind. He's good like that. They reach Rager's safe house, which is in the basement of a castle for some reason, and Rager pulls out something from behind some bunk beds. It's a big white rectangle that emits its own light. Kirk calls it a lighting panel. Good name. And Spock seems surprised to see it considering the tech level they've seen around here so far. Rager says it's from a time before Landru. He says he don't know how long ago that was, but that some say it's as far back as 6,000 years. Kirk's trying to put two and two together with the staffs, the lawgivers and townspeople being controlled with telepathy, the lighting panel, and then Spock picks up an intense power source close by on his tricorder. McCoy says O'Neill is coming around, but Rager again says that he's got to stay out because he's absorbed, and if he's awake, Landru can find him. Kirk asks about the whole absorption thing. Rager says Landru does that instead of killing people. Well, unless you're Tamar, I guess. But when the Archons came, they caused a lot of havoc, and Landru killed a lot of them, but absorbed the rest. He also says that he's part of an organization that resists Landru, that they're organized in threes. He and Tamar were two of their triad, but he don't know who the third was. Tamar was the one who knew that. He says he don't know how, but some people are kind of immune to absorption, and they keep a low profile. Says some of the Archons were like that too. Kirk asks about the Archons, and Rager says Landru pulled them down from the sky. Spock says that power reading he found would be powerful enough to do that. Uh-oh. Well, Kirk gets on the horn to Scotty on the Enterprise and finds out that there are some heat beams hitting the ship. The shields are holding, but it's taken all of their power to keep them up. If they try to use their engines to leave, even impulse, they'll burn alive. That also means their orbit is decaying and they'll hit Atmo in 12 hours. Well, where you been, ticking clock? We was worried about you. Well, O'Neill or not, it looks like Kirk's phone call drew the attention of Landru anyway, and weird sounds start happening again. Rager kind of freaks out and starts acting like a Landru-aholic all of a sudden, and on one of the walls, a weird guy in shiny robes and impressive hair appears. Says he's Landru. Says this world ain't got no war, no crime, no disease, none of that stuff. Why you want to goof with that? So since we're all about the tranquility and peace down here, We're gonna absorb your ass into the body, and then you're gonna be happy, and all of this nonsense can be over, and everybody can just be happy and sing songs and bake cookies and all that. And don't bother, resistance is futile. And before he can get a cease and desist order for trademark infringement, a loud sound knocks everybody out. After a commercial break, everybody wakes up in a cell that looks remarkably like the place they just was. Their gear has been taken, and it looks like McCoy and Galloway are missing too. While they're looking around trying to figure a way out, Spock mentions that the lawgiver's reaction to Kirk telling them to pound sand a while ago was a lot like a computer when it's given insufficient or contradictory information. He don't think that they're computers, but there's definitely something hinky going on here. Just then, the lawgivers come in with McCoy and Galloway, and they've been happy-zapped and don't even seem to recognize Kirk and Spock. But he'll tell you all about some Landru. I feel like the CrossFit guys are probably taking notes here. Then the lawgivers order Kirk to come with them. Kirk tries the nope thing, and they say, well, then we're gonna Tamar your ass. Looks like the brothers Creepy finally figured out how to hit a curveball. Cut to the absorption chamber. As Kirk is getting locked into a futuristic machine, there's a shift change and a Peter Boyle-looking dude comes in. Calls himself Marplon. He relieves one of the lawgivers at the controls of what we assume is the Absorbitron or whatever. Back in the cell, Spock is trying to mind meld with McCoy, but he's just getting a busy signal. Can't get through. It ain't long until the robes are back and want Spock to come with them now, too. We'll cut back to the Absorbitron room, and it looks like Kirk is riding on the Peace and Tranquility train. He greets Spock as he and the robes walk in, and as happy as Kirk seems, that's exactly the amount of happy Spock don't seem. The robes stick Spock in the Absorbitron, and Marplon starts jacking with the controls. Once they leave, though, Marplon tells Spock that while he wasn't there in time to save McCoy and Galloway, Kirk is actually fine. He releases Spock from the Absorbitron and tells him that he's actually the third guy in Rager's triad of resistance people. He tells Spock that they've been waiting for Spock and the rest of the strangers, that they're fulfilling prophecy. Spock wants more information, but there ain't time, and anyways, Landru might hear them talking. But he does give Spock back the phasers they took from the landing party. The robes show up to take Spock back to the cell, and he acts high on that sweet, sweet Landru Chiba, and they totally buy it. Spock shows back up in the cell, and he, Kirk, and Lindstrom are trying to have a conversation, but Dr. Feelgood over here tries to listen in because he's getting suspicious of all the whispering. Kirk throws out some Cat Stevens lyrics at him, though, and that seems to make him feel better. Now that they can talk a little freer, Spock says this society is dead. No spark. It's peaceful in the same way that a machine is peaceful, mechanical and robotic, and they get all of their directives from Landru. But there actually ain't no Landru, not one that's a dude anyway. Kirk says he totally came to that conclusion too, and they gotta pull the plug, and Landru must die. Spock points out the Federation's prime directive of non-interference, but Kirk says that refers to a living and growing culture. This don't count. It's at this point that Marplon and Rager show up in the cell, in character, as it were. After doing the secret handshake with the actual Landru people, they come over to Kirk and the other non-absorbed. Marplon has gotten their communicators for him and hands them to Kirk. As they're discussing how to proceed, Kirk emotes a little too loudly, and McCoy overhears and pulls an invasion of the body snatchers. Kirk tries to calm him down, but nothing doing, and it's Landrus versus non-Landrus and a fight to the finish. McCoy is screaming for the lawgivers while trying to choke Kirk to death, and Spock is making short work of Galloway. Kirk subdues McCoy just before some robes show up, and Kirk and Spock both punch him out. Kirk is a little surprised that Spock did go for the neck pinch, but hey, sometimes Spock's gotta work through some stuff his way, you know? Well, Kirk and Spock put on the robes, and they try to get Rager and Marplon to give them information on where they can find Landru, but the two of them start to get cold feet about this whole resistance thing. It's getting a little too real. Kirk tries to snap him out of it. Spock checks in with the Enterprise, and Scotty says their orbit is still decaying. Kirk tells Scotty to put a guard on Sulu. Now that he knows that Landrunis can be used by Landru, Sulu is a liability on the Enterprise. Rager tells Kirk the origin story of Landru. The world was in great conflict, and Landru, a leader at the time, thought the solution was to take society back to a simpler time. A time of peace and tranquility, apparently. Kirk asks for help against Landru, and Rager completely panics and decides he's fine with Landru after all, and starts calling for the lawgivers. Spock neck pinches him. Kirk says, well, he was useless. How about you, Marplon? Cut to Marplon leading our boys to the Hall of Audiences, where he says the people come to commune with Landru. They go in, and Kirk calls out to Landru saying, "Hey, we're the Archons, and we've got a bone to pick with you." Well, Landru the Gozerian shows up on the wall and don't seem too thrilled with Archons being all up in his crib. He says Kirk and the gang have infected the body, and they gotta be whacked. Not only them, but everyone they interacted with. Yeesh. Kirk starts to object, but Spock points out it's only a projection and he probably can't hear him. Kirk says, well, if talking don't work, it's phaserin' time, and he and Spock blow a hole in the wall behind the projection, revealing a 60s TV computer. Who could have predicted? I gotta say, Marplon has taken his entire worldview being turned upside down remarkably well. Well, Kirk and Spock try to phaser the computer, and Landru reminds them that computer though he may be, he still packs a punch by deactivating their phasers. Kirk says, well, if phaserin' don't work, it's talking time, and the battle of wits begins. Landru says he keeps the body safe and peaceful. Kirk says you have no soul and stifle creativity. Landru says, but the body is happy and safe. Well, Kirk says without creativity, the body dies, and Landru is the cause of that, so he's the real threat to the body. Threatening the body is evil, and evil must be destroyed, so get on with it. And then Landru the computer blows up. Kirk calls the ship, and the heat rays have stopped, and Sulu is back to normal. Kirk tells Marplon, well, we blew up your 6,000-year-old society. Hope things work out for you. See ya. No kidding, that's basically what happens. In the epilogue, we learn that Lindstrom is staying behind to, quote, restore the culture to a human form. Spock expresses his admiration for the Landru computer, calling it a marvelous feat of engineering. Kirk says Spock would make a splendid computer himself, and Spock seems genuinely touched by the compliment. Lindstrom reports that there's already some fighting going on down on the planet, so things are getting back to normal. And we roll credits. Great stuff. A lot of great stuff in this episode, but most of that we're going to talk about in the Ruminations segment. But there are some good lines here I want to talk about.
Isn't that somewhat old-fashioned?
Director Joe Pevney had blocked out these quick fights in such a way where Spock wasn't in a good position to do the neck pinch thing, and so they let him just slug the lawgiver. But Kirk's line there wasn't actually in the script. It was an ad-lib from Shatner, and I think it works beautifully. Speaking of ad-libs by the cast, it was Leonard Nimoy's idea that Spock sleeps with his eyes open. It's really interesting how much of what makes Spock Spock came directly from Nimoy. He really cared deeply for the character and was very protective of him. It's honestly difficult to think of a character more intimately connected to the actor who played them than Spock and Nimoy.
But there is evil.
Then the evil must be destroyed. That is the prime directive. And you are the evil. You are the evil. The evil must be destroyed. Fulfill the prime directive. You,
Landru, help me.
are the evil. Fulfill the prime directive.
The battle of wits between Kirk and Landru the computer. Now, as some of you already know, I did a whole video about how Kirk can talk computers into blowing themselves up, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that here. Link to that video is in the description down there. But Shatner does a great job with this, and it is, after all, the first time we get what will soon become a classic Star Trek trope.
You said you wanted freedom. It's time you learned that freedom is never a gift. It has to be earned. Come on.
Again, we'll get more into the messages behind this episode later, but this is a pretty classic bumper sticker kind of line that sums up a lot of what this episode is about. It would have been easy to deliver this line in a very cheesy way, but Shatner does a really good job with it.
Predictably metaphysical. I prefer the concrete, the graspable, the provable.
You'd make a splendid computer, Mr. Spock.
That is very kind of you, Captain.
Another of those great lines from Spock where something that would have insulted a human is taken as a compliment. In an episode without a lot of humor in it, this is a nice bit of fun at the end there. Overall, the look of this episode is just outstanding. I love the detail that they showed up in clothing that was from the wrong period, and that got Sulu and O'Neill fingered as not being of the body. All of the guest stars do an excellent job. Well, almost all of them, but we'll talk about this guy later. But even with the strangely dungeon-like sets, the world of Beta 3 just looks really good. It ain't hard to see, though, with all the costumes, sets, guest stars, and extras, that this ended up being one of the original series' more expensive episodes. And finally, there's this.
Well, Marplon, you're on your own now. I hope you're up to it. You can get rid of those robes. And if I were you, I'd start looking for another job.
I love how Kirk and Spock have just completely derailed a 6,000-year-old society, and Kirk is just like, well, you're welcome. Have fun. See ya. The Goof. I'm actually not going to talk about this guy in this section, because it turns out his performance wasn't entirely his fault, so it ain't really technically Goof, goofy though it may be. This, though, is definitely Goof. When the red hour starts and our boys are running for Rage's place, I want you to watch what happens to Lindstrom. You see that? A big-ass rock just bounces off of his head. That is one stout noggin on our sociologist there. Another bit of goof is that we take Galloway, McCoy, Kirk, and Spock into this giant chamber with this sophisticated machinery in order to absorb them into the body. And yet, at the beginning, one of the lawgivers manages to absorb Sulu with just his pipe stick. What the heck is up with that? Ruminations. You ever go to a costume party that everybody knows is a costume party, but when you get there, you're the only schmuck that showed up with a costume on? Well, hold that thought as we address this guy.
Come for the festival, eh, ya?
Yes.
Got a place to sleep it off yet? Go round to Rage's house. He's got rooms. These folks come for the festival. Your daddy can put them up, can't he?
Oof, that's bad. But like I said earlier, it ain't entirely his fault. The production people told him that they wanted a 19th century New England kind of feel, so he asked if they wanted him to try to do that kind of dialect with his lines. According to actor Lev Mailer, the stage name for Ralph Maurer, who played Belar here, they said, oh yeah, sure. So we get what we got. But when he watched the show, he sees that he's the only schmuck doing the goofy dialect. And while it's true he wasn't very good at it anyway, I still gotta feel bad for the guy because he really got thrown under the horse cart. But in his very mild defense, it does lend a creepiness to his character that serves to give us another red flag about the people of Beta 3. So there's that, I guess. Speaking of the people of Beta 3, something that the episode is really ambiguous about is who these Beta 3 people are. There are a number of instances of the word human when it comes to them, but no one outright calls them human.
A computer capable of directing the lives of millions of human beings.
But only a machine, Mr. Spock.
Already this morning, we've had half a dozen domestic quarrels and 2 genuine knockdown dragouts. It may not be paradise, but it's certainly human.
Sounds most promising. Are you suggesting that the lawgivers are mere computers? That they aren't human?
Quite human, Captain. Simply that all the facts are not yet in.
Now, in the original series, we meet a lot of alien species that look exactly like humans without any makeup at all. But usually an effort is made through costumes or set design to make it clear that they ain't from Earth. People like the Armenians in A Taste of Armageddon, or the Capellans in Friday's Child, stuff like that. Aliens what don't look alien because of makeup, just because of costumes and maybe hairdos. But these guys live in Mayberry and dress like they're getting a novelty photo at Silver Dollar City over here. So on the one hand, there's a lot of human stuff going on, but on the other, it's been 6,000 years since Landru took over, and before that, technology was such that that lighting panel was a thing. And that thing is impressive. Remember, it's at least 6,000 years old and it's still going strong. So if these guys are humans, there must be some kind of Stargate thing going on and they was seeded here from Earth about 10,000 years ago or something. I don't usually ding the show for stuff like this because in the end, it's a sci-fi television show from the 60s, and things like how everybody speaks English and all of that is just how it's going to be. But in this case, a big deal is made of how old the civilization is, and unless a Baton year is like a week and a half, these people can't be human. And if they're not human, this line right here...
Sociologist Lindstrom is remaining behind with a party of experts who will help restore the planet's culture to a human form.
is actually kind of chilling, you know? We destroyed your society, and now we're going to put one in that's more correct, like us. This is the first episode to mention the prime directive of non-interference. Now, I ain't going to get into the philosophical and moral implications of the prime directive. That's a whole other video. But it is funny that we don't hear of the existence of the thing too long before Kirk is already breaking it. Now, to be fair to our dear captain, I think he's 100% right in his decision to break it in this case. Or more to the point that what he decides to do ain't actually breaking it at all. But it's fun to see the very first of dozens and dozens of times a starship captain is going to wrestle with the prime directive. This really is a great episode of Star Trek. One of those Gulliver's Travels kind of episodes where the Enterprise shows up at a planet, something is hinky with the people on the planet, and then our heroes work to find out just what's so hinky, then find out a way to fix it, and, through the whole ordeal, examine something about our present-day society, and if it don't outright suggest a solution, at the very least, serves as a warning of how things can get if we don't stay vigilant. That is the bread and butter of most science fiction, to be honest, and of Star Trek in particular. In 1967, when this was first aired, the Red Scare was a huge part of the American national consciousness. The worry that Soviet-style communism was going to spread across the globe. The most obvious example of this worry at the time being the Vietnam War. Ostensibly, we were fighting to keep Soviet and Chinese communism from absorbing Vietnam into the body, as it were. Now, the horrors of the cult of Landru, the stifling of creativity, the lack of individuality and freedom of will and choice, the peace and tranquility being of an involuntary nature with harsh punishments for even the slightest of transgressions like mocking the lawgivers, all of these things were also seen to be consequences of a Soviet-style communistic society, and thus something to be resisted heavily. Now, some of those fears weren't as based in fact as some of the other ones was, but that's going to happen with this kind of thing. Fear ain't usually known for its attention to nuance. In actual fact, the true danger of that kind of government is the almost fanatical authoritarianism that makes it heresy to criticize the government specifically or communism in general, no matter the circumstances, and how that can lead to really, really bad things. If you want to see an example of what I'm talking about, go and watch the excellent miniseries Chernobyl. And remember, barring some decisions made to change some details here and there for storytelling purposes, all of that actually happened. Return of the Archons shows us what can happen when blind devotion to a leader becomes the requirement of a society, especially a leader who wants to take society back to a simpler time. Even if the intentions aren't nefarious, remember Landru was just doing what he thought was right for the good of the people, consequences can be disastrous. Remember that, kids. Also, drink your Ovaltine. So there you have it, the return of the Archons. Got a question for you. What do you think the purpose of the Red Hour is? Because I can't come up with one. Is it some kind of pressure valve for the people to let off steam? It don't seem so, because the people seem just as under Landru's control during festival as any other time. Anyways, let me hear your theories down in the comments there. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. Helps to spread it out to more people. And subscribe if you ain't done so already. If you're in a position to help the channel out monetarily, we got channel memberships, the thanks button, and the merch store at adstudiosmerch.com. Got some new shirt designs up there if you're interested, and lots of classics as well. But honestly, I'm just glad you decided to take some time and watch some stuff with me, Possum Rob. Next time... Until then, possum friends are awesome friends. Take it easy, all right? Later.